In this video, I want to look at the idea of prisms, cylinders, pyramids, and cones. Let's start with the idea of a prism. This is a special type of polyhedron. Many people hang glass or crystal prisms in their windows to bend the incoming light and cast rainbow patterns around the room. But what is it mathematically? Let's start with a right prism. A right prism is a polyhedron that can be thought of as going straight up over a polygon. We can think of right prisms by taking two paper copies of any polygon, lay them flat on the table, one on top of the other, so they match up. And then we're going to move the top one straight up above the bottom one. So the vertical rectangular faces are now placed so as to connect corresponding sides of the two polygons. Then it would be a right prism. Here are a couple of examples of right prisms. We have our starting shape, and then at the top and the bottom, and then rectangular sides going up. Same thing here. In these starting shapes that are on both the top and the bottom, these are known as the base. So this one here has a triangular base, this one here has a rectangular base. So to define an actual prism, rather than just a right prism, we need to just modify this a little bit more. So as before, let's start with two paper copies of any polygon and lay both flat on the table, one on top of the other so they match up. And instead of moving the top polygon straight up, we're going to move it up without twisting away from the bottom polygon, keeping the two polygons parallel. It doesn't need to go straight up, it can go to one side as long as it's not twisted and it remains parallel to the bottom polygon. So here are two examples of prisms that are not right prisms. These are also known as oblique prisms. But the idea is I did still start with the same top and bottom shape, and I did still move it up. I just kind of shifted it to the left, right, front, back, something like that. But the main thing is the two bases do need to be parallel and not twisted. And occasionally a prism may be moved to a different orientation in space, but it's still a prism, such as this one here. This is a prism, although you may need to rotate it mentally to be convinced that it really is a prism. Prisms are often named according to the type of polygon that makes up the base of the prism. So as an example here, this has a triangle base. So this would be a triangular prism. We could also have something like a rectangular prism, which would have a rectangular base, etc. The next shape I want to look at is a cylinder, which is a kind of shape that's related to prisms. Very roughly speaking, a cylinder is just a tube-shaped object, such as the inside of a roll of paper towels is an example of a cylinder, or a can of soup would be an example of a cylinder. Here are two examples of cylinder, both a right cylinder and an oblique cylinder. The idea of a cylinder is instead of a polygon to start with, like for a prism, we start with a circle. So we imagine taking two copies of a circle, lying them on top of each other, picking up the top one, and without twisting it, we move it away from the bottom copy, keeping the two copies parallel. And then we think of something connecting the sides of these circles. So it is just a prism, except for instead of starting with a polygon, we need to start with a circle. Another special type of polyhedron that we have is a pyramid. For a pyramid, we start with any shape and a separate single point known as the apex. As an example, I have a shape here and the point apex up here. And the main thing is the apex does not lie in the plane of the polygon. So the idea is we are going to connect the apex down to the original shape with additional polygons, as we can see here. So this right here would be a pyramid. In fact, this is known as an oblique rectangular pyramid. Just like with prisms, if the apex is directly above the shape, it is known as right. Otherwise, it is known as oblique. The main thing is a right pyramid is for when the point lies straight up over the center of the base. Anything not is known as oblique, so this one would be oblique. The base is rectangular, so we call this rectangular pyramid. So we use oblique or right depending on telling where the vertex is in relation, the shape of the base, and then pyramid to name these appropriately. Finally, let's consider a cone. Just as cylinders are shapes that are related to prisms, cones are shapes that are related to pyramids. So when we think of cones, we can think of things like ice cream cones or cone-shaped paper cups. The idea of a cone is instead of starting with a shape, we're going to start with a circle and our apex, and then connect down. Sometimes when we refer to the cones, we refer to the actual sides of the shape, the slanted sides, as well as the base, and sometimes we are referring to it without the base. Both of these are valid and known as a cone. And just like before, we can have a right cone where it's directly over, or I could have another cone where my apex is to the side, and that would be known as an oblique cone.